Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something you might not expect.
Yeah.
Islamic methods for correcting people's mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, before you think this is going to be all, fire and brimstone and
Right.
harsh punishments, I was really surprised to learn just how diverse and insightful these approaches can be.
Absolutely. So the source material that we're working with is a text called The Prophet's Methods, and it outlines 39 distinct methods for correcting people's mistakes.
39.
39
That's a lot to cover.
is a lot.
Where do we even begin with something like that?
Well, it's important to understand the foundation first.
Okay.
In Islam, correcting mistakes is deeply tied to the ideas of sincere advice and forbidding evil.
So it's not just about stopping bad behavior, but about guiding people towards what's right.
Exactly. And there's a really important duality here.
Okay.
It's about forbidding the wrong, A&D encouraging good.
Gotcha.
It's all part of education and growth. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But with 39 methods, I mean, obviously we can't go through every single one.
Right.
Is there any way that we can categorize these to make it easier to grasp?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can group them thematically.
Okay.
For example, some methods focus on direct and immediate action.
So like nip it in the bud kind of stuff.
Precisely. One method that the text emphasizes is hastening to deal with mistakes, not letting things fester.
Uh-huh.
Think about it. How often do small issues become huge problems just because we avoid addressing them early on?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that one. So what's another example of this direct approach?
Well, there's the simple act of asking the person to stop the wrong action.
Okay.
Sound obvious,
You're right.
but we often hesitate to speak up, even when it's necessary.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes the most straightforward solutions are the hardest to put into practice. I think
Yeah.
we overthink things and worry about confrontation and, all
Right.
that.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between being assertive and being compassionate, which is something we'll see throughout all of these methods.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've got the direct approach. What other kinds of categories are there?
Another set of methods focuses on appealing to a person's understanding and faith.
Interesting. So not just telling someone what to do, but helping them connect it back to their own belief system.
Yes. For instance, the text talks about referring people back to Islamic rulings.
Okay.
Now imagine someone struggling with dishonesty.
Uh-huh.
By reminding them of the Islamic emphasis on truthfulness. You're not just saying don't lie. You're connecting their actions to this larger framework of values,
I see.
to the very principles that shape a just society.
That's powerful. It's appealing to their conscience in a way, reminding them why certain things are wrong, not just that they're wrong. Are there other examples like this?
Definitely. The text also mentions repeatedly reminding people to fear Allah.
Okay.
Now, this might sound harsh at first,
Yeah.
but it's not just about punishment. It's about reminding them of the consequences of their actions, both in this life and the hereafter.
So appealing to a higher authority, a sense of accountability beyond just human laws.
Exactly. It's about tapping into those deeper motivations for being a good person, for making amends when you've messed up.
Okay, so we've got direct action and appeals to faith. What else is in this fascinating toolkit?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. A whole set of methods that emphasize compassionate correction.
Compassionate correction. I'm intrigued.
The text specifically highlights showing compassion to the one making a mistake.
Okay.
It also talks about not hastening to tell someone they're wrong, which creates space for them to reflect and potentially self-correct.
That makes so much sense. It reminds me of that saying, everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Right.
Someone might be making a mistake because they're going through something difficult. They're stressed. They're not thinking clearly.
Absolutely. And sometimes, even if their actions are wrong, jumping down their throat isn't the most effective way to get them to change.
Right.
Giving them space, showing empathy can go a long way.
Yeah, it's about giving them the benefit of the doubt, recognizing that they might be going through something, and approaching the situation with a little more grace. I like that.
And remember, this is all rooted in the Islamic emphasis on mercy.
Okay.
It's a reminder that even when correcting someone, our intention should be to help them, not to punish them.
So we've got direct action, appeals to faith, and compassionate correction. This is already way more nuanced than I expected. What other approaches does the text outline?
Well, some methods focus on indirect approaches, utilizing social dynamics to address the issue.
Social dynamics. That sounds a bit more complex.
It can be. For example, instead of confronting someone directly, you might address the issue in general terms.
So like dropping subtle hints, kind of a if the shoe fits approach?
Exactly. This can be particularly effective when dealing with sensitive issues or when you want to save someone's face.
Right.
It allows them to reflect on their behavior without feeling publicly shamed.
It's a more subtle way of addressing things, especially in social situations where you don't want to cause a scene or embarrass anyone. What's another example of this indirect approach?
The text mentions provoking public opinion against the mistake.
Okay.
Now, this one requires careful consideration.
I can see how that could be tricky. Social pressure can be a powerful force for good, but it can also be misused.
Precisely, the key is to use it judiciously and ethically.
Right.
It's about raising awareness, not about bullying or ostracizing someone.
Yeah, it's about creating a social environment where certain behaviors are clearly unacceptable, but doing so in a way that encourages positive change, not just shame and punishment.
Wow, this is really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got direct action appeals to faith, compassionate correction, and indirect approaches. Are there any other categories?
Yes, the text also outlines a set of restorative methods, ways to not only address the mistake, but to help the person make things right. Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just about dwelling on the wrong, but about taking concrete steps to fix it.
Exactly. One method is explaining how to put things right and asking for correction.
Okay.
This encourages the person to take responsibility for their actions and to actively seek a solution.
So it's about moving beyond apologies and into action.
Precisely. It's about empowering the person to make amends and to learn from their mistakes.
Okay, I'm really liking this restorative approach. It feels very practical and solution-oriented. What else falls into this category?
Well, there's this really intriguing concept called offering kafara.
Kafara, that's a new one for me. What
Yeah.
exactly is that?
It refers to acts of expiation or making up for a wrongdoing.
Okay.
It's about going beyond simply saying sorry and taking concrete steps to restore balance.
Hmm.
For instance, it could involve giving to charity fasting or performing other good deeds.
So it's like taking a spiritual inventory and then taking concrete actions to balance the scales?
Exactly. It shows a genuine commitment to change, not just words. And it emphasizes the importance of restoring harmony, both with the person you've wronged and with God.
That's amazing. It adds this whole other layer to the idea of making amends. Okay, so far we've got direct action appeals to faith, compassionate approaches, indirect methods, and now this restorative category. Is there anything else, or have we covered the whole spectrum?
We've covered a good chunk of the gentler approaches,
Okay.
but the text also addresses those times when a firmer hand might be necessary.
Oh, okay. So there are times when subtle hints and compassionate understanding just aren't enough?
Right. There are situations where stronger measures are needed to address more serious issues.
Well, I guess that makes sense. Before we dive into that, though, maybe we should pause here for a second and let our listener digest all this.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground already.
Take a moment and think about these different approaches. Have you ever encountered situations where one of these methods might have been helpful? We'll be back in a moment to explore those times when a firmer hand is required. All right, welcome back. So far, we've explored a range of approaches to correcting mistakes, focusing on understanding compassion and restoration.
Right.
But the text also acknowledges that there are times when a firmer approach might be necessary.
Right, because let's face it, sometimes gentle reminders and subtle hints just don't cut it.
Right.
There are situations where you need to be more direct, maybe even a bit tougher.
Exactly. The text addresses those situations where the mistake is serious, where there's a potential for real harm,
Okay.
or when previous attempts at correction have failed.
So what kinds of methods are we talking about here? Give me an example.
Well, one method is showing anger about a crucial mistake, especially in matters of belief.
Okay, showing anger. That sounds intense.
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense if it's something really important, a core value that's being violated.
It's not about flying off the handle or being uncontrolled. It's about demonstrating the gravity of the situation. The anger in this context stems from concern and a desire to protect what's sacred.
So it's more about righteous indignation than personal rage.
Precisely. It's about making it clear that this is not something to be taken lightly.
Okay, I can see that. What other methods fall into this category of being more firm?
There's the idea of turning away from the one who has made a mistake, avoiding arguments, hoping they'll reconsider their actions.
Ah, so it's like the opposite of that direct approach we talked about earlier.
Right.
Instead of confronting them head on, you're giving them space, letting them cool down, hoping they'll come around on their own.
Exactly. Sometimes a bit of distance can be more effective than a heated confrontation, especially if tempers are flaring.
It's like that old saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Right.
But I guess there are times when you need a stronger tactic.
Right. And in those cases, the text suggests rebuking the person, directly addressing their mistake and expressing disapproval.
Okay, so this is where we move from subtle hints to a more direct approach. No more beating around the bush.
Exactly. It's about being clear and unambiguous about the fact that what they've done is wrong.
And if the mistake is obvious and can't be ignored, the text suggests blaming the person who made it, making it clear they're accountable.
That's right. It's about holding them responsible for their actions, making sure they understand that actions have consequences.
So we've moved from gentle reminders to direct rebukes. Are there any other methods in this firmer hand category?
Yes, in cases where the mistake is particularly severe and other methods haven't worked, the text mentions even stronger measures, for instance, shunning or boycotting the individual.
Wow, that sounds pretty intense. It seems almost like tough love taken to the extreme.
It is a last resort, reserved for situations where the individual's actions are causing significant harm to themselves or to the community.
So it's not about being cruel or vindictive. It's about protecting the well-being of everyone involved, even if it means taking drastic measures.
Exactly. It's about creating a consequence that's serious enough to make the person reconsider their behavior and hopefully choose a different path.
It's like that intervention episode you see on TV sometimes where everyone comes together and says, look, we love you, but you need to get help.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And in the most extreme cases where someone persistently refuses to change the text, mentions praying against someone.
Whoa, that sounds really heavy. Is that like wishing harm on them?
Not quite. It's more about appealing to a higher power for guidance and intervention. It's acknowledging that you've done everything you can, but ultimately this person is beyond your reach. You're asking for divine help to guide them back to the right path.
So it's almost like a last-ditch effort to help them, even if it's from a distance.
Precisely. It's recognizing the limitations of human efforts and seeking a higher power's assistance.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking. We've covered so much ground, from gentle nudges and compassionate guidance to these more serious measures, even social pressure and spiritual appeals. It's amazing how many different approaches the text outlines, all geared toward encouraging positive change.
It highlights the complexities of human behavior and the need for a nuanced approach to correction. What's fascinating is that even in the most serious situations, the underlying intention is still to help the person, not just to punish them.
That's what strikes me the most about all of this, the balance between firmness and compassion. It's about holding people accountable while still recognizing their humanity, their potential for growth and redemption.
Exactly. And it reminds us that even when we need to be firm, our goal should always be to guide people towards a better path, not to break them down.
This deep dive has been an eye-opener. It's made me think about how I approach these situations in my own life, how I can be more effective in helping others while still being mindful of their feelings and their dignity.
And remember, this is just a glimpse into a vast and intricate system of ethical and social guidance. There's so much more to explore and learn from these teachings.
Absolutely. Okay, before we move on, maybe we should pause here for a moment and give our listener a chance to process all this. It's been quite a journey from those gentler approaches to these more serious methods.
Take a moment and think about what we've discussed. Which of these methods resonate with you? Have you ever encountered a situation where one of these approaches might have been helpful?
All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Islamic methods for correcting mistakes. It's been quite a journey, from gentle reminders to those firmer approaches we just discussed.
Yes, we've covered a remarkable range of methods, haven't we? What's striking is how each one emphasizes understanding and the importance of choosing the right approach for each situation.
You're right, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There's real nuance here, and it's made me realize that sometimes the most effective way to help someone is to have an open and honest conversation with them.
Absolutely. Remember those methods from the text that focus on dialogue and persuasion, like meeting with the person to talk it over, or persuading them that they're making a mistake?
Yeah, it's about really engaging with them, helping them see things from a different perspective, maybe even challenging their assumptions.
Right. It's not about dictating what's right or wrong, but about helping them to understand the impact of their actions.
And sometimes that means being direct, right? The text even mentions speaking bluntly, which I found interesting.
Yes, speaking bluntly is about being honest and straightforward, but always with the intention of helping the person understand the gravity of their actions and encouraging them to make amends.
So even when you're being direct, the goal is still to guide them towards positive change.
Exactly. It's about striking that balance between honesty and compassion. And it's important to remember that we all have a role to play in this process.
You're right. The text talks about helping a Muslim to correct his mistake. It's a reminder that we have a responsibility to support each other in this journey of growth and self-improvement.
It's about offering a helping hand, not just pointing fingers or judging. And sometimes that means calling out those flimsy excuses we all tend to make.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. The text mentions making a person understand that their flimsy excuse is not acceptable.
Right.
We've all been there trying to justify our actions even when we know we're wrong.
It's a natural human tendency. But true growth requires us to be honest with ourselves and take responsibility for our mistakes.
It's about fostering a culture of accountability and integrity, right?
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the most important thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how nuanced and multifaceted this whole process of correcting mistakes really is. It's not about blindly following a set of rules, but about understanding the context, the individual, and choosing the most appropriate method for encouraging positive change.
I agree. It's about approaching these situations with both wisdom and compassion, always seeking to understand before judging, and always holding on to the hope of redemption.
It's a powerful message, and it's given me a lot to think about.
As you reflect on all these methods, I'll leave you with this question. Which one resonated with you most, and how might you apply it in your own life?
That's a great question for all of us to ponder. Maybe there's a method you can try out, a new perspective you can consider. Whatever it is, I hope this deep dive has sparked some reflection and maybe even inspired a bit of positive change. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep diving deep.